Judge Juan Merchan grants Trump's attorney's request to dismiss his New York criminal case. Left-wing media experiences major shakeups after the presidential election, including the Washington Post firing its senior political editor. And the transgender bathroom issue serves as a litmus test for House Republicans' alignment on the MAGA mandate. We have those stories and so much more. Blaze News Tonight starts right now. Welcome to the chaos. I'm Jill Savage. Today is Friday, November 22nd. Earlier today, Donald Trump's sentencing in New York was postponed indefinitely. Back in May, Trump was convicted on 34 felony counts of falsifying business records to cover up a hush money payment to Stormy Daniels ahead of the 2016 election. Judge Merchan directed Trump to file a formal motion to have the case dismissed by December 2nd. Here to discuss is Matthew Peterson, editor-in-chief of Blaze News, and Josh Hammer. He's a senior editor-at-large for Newsweek and the host of The Josh Hammer Show. So, Josh, is this it? Is it over now? Break this down for us. What does it mean?
You know, I wish I could say it was over. And it probably is. But if we're just hedging our bets here, and we really should not be anything other than hedging our bets if we're just being brutally honest, it's not over until it's over. I mean, what's the classic old saying? Was it Yogi Berra, the great Yankees Hall of Fame catcher, who said it's not over until the fat lady sings? I mean, until he actually says that it's finally over, is probably not finally over. So what's actually happened today is that he has agreed to indefinitely delay the sentencing. The sentencing date has already been postponed like literally 3 times. It was first supposed to be in July. Then they postponed it from July until September in the aftermath of the Trump versus United States Supreme Court case, which had a lot of legal language to unpack when it comes to presidential immunity. And then in September, it was delayed again until after the election in November, and then it's been delayed. So right now, you still have the prosecutor's office, which is pleading their case. You still have Alvin Bragg and Matthew Colangelo in the Manhattan DA's office, which is saying, okay, right now, our stance, I'm speaking for them, their stance is that this sentencing decision should be held in abeyance for 4 years while Donald Trump goes down to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue and serves as president of the United States. So they're not ready to fully throw in the towel yet. What Merchan is saying is that he is delaying the sentencing indefinitely until he makes a final decision as to whether to actually dismiss this case once and for all. And he's given Trump's lawyers a deadline of December 2nd. So that's a week from Monday. That is their deadline to resubmit their motion to dismiss the case, to make the argument as to why they should dismiss this case. It seems to me like this motion has been filed multiple times already. Merchan has not been having it. That's why I'm still a little skeptical, to be honest with you. I'm not entirely sure that Merchan finally gets it, and I'm not willing to confidently predict that he will do the right thing, but I will cautiously predict that he's more likely than not to dismiss it after this next subsequent round of motion to dismiss and reply brief, but I wouldn't be willing to bet the ranch on it either.
It really is unbelievable times in which we live. Wouldn't bet the ranch on it, and also, of course, the winds of politics have nothing to do with any of this. This is just the justice system at work. I want to move on to the Trump picks, the way that we've been thinking about this is to talk about MSNBC, right, being scared about Pam Bondi being the Attorney General nominee after Gates because they say she's effective. And it's sort of the implication is, she's profesh and she will put fear in our hearts. But let me be honest about this one. This one took me back. I haven't been following all the picks or all the swirls coming out of Mar-a-Lago. I've been following a few things closely, but not all of it personally. I mean, I was a little bit, this came out of left field for me, right? Just in terms of, I'm thinking about Ken Paxton. I'm thinking about Bailey in Missouri. But what do we know about Bondi? And talk to us about this pick.
Yeah, Matt, I'll be very honest with you. I'm not thrilled with the pick. It definitely would not have been my top choice. Pam Bondi would not have been on my short list. I mean, she's competent. I mean, she was a two-term attorney general of the nation's third largest state. Look, she was a leader in the Barack Obama era, right? So she came into office along with Rick Scott here in Florida back in 2011, 2012. So she was one of the leaders of the states fighting Obamacare, which is obviously a very good and laudable thing, to be clear. I'm not taking that away from her. But she's kind of yesterday's cup of tea in many ways. And, if I were advising Trump, I would have advised him to go in a more forward-facing direction. Ken Paxton, Andrew Bailey, you name both of them. Both of those picks certainly would have been exceptional. I have some very specific concerns about Pam Bondi as well. I saw Dana Lash point out that Pam Bondi supported some pro-gun control measures in Florida, especially in the aftermath of the Parkland shooting. Some measures which Rick Scott signed into law pertain to red flag laws. She was also bringing home, I think, $115,000 a month in one point as a registered foreign agent of the Qatari government. So at a bare minimum, I would like to make sure that is no longer the case and that she is no longer an asset of what is essentially a state sponsor of terrorism. I assume she's not, to be clear, at this point there. So I do have some legitimate questions about her. But again, she's someone who's been a prosecutor for 20 years. That record speaks for itself in many ways. When it comes to kind of bread and butter, enforce the rule of law, secure the border style issues, I have no doubt that she will be effective. She's not a blowtorch. I mean, she is not someone who's going to come in there and basically clean out the Augean stables and burn the whole thing down like a Matt Gaetz would have been. So if that's what you were hoping for, I'm not sure that she's the right pick, to be honest with you. But again, as someone who personally hopes that the Trump-Vance administration succeeds in all that they want to do, I wish her all the best.
Well, Josh, let's look at the Pennsylvania Senate race because it's finally over. This went on for weeks, and after refusing to concede, Senator Bob Casey has thrown in the towel following the state Supreme Court decision. Now, the court did side with the Republicans, saying that the undated or misdated ballots could not be counted. That's what the Republicans were pushing for the entire time. So when you look at this case, right, trying to go out there and count the undated, the misdated ballots, how big of a win is this for Republicans? Not just getting the actual Senate seat, but to just look at this going forward.
Well, it's great that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court finally waded in and said to Bucks County, Pennsylvania, stop counting votes that we told you that you can't actually legally count. It took them a very long time, Jill, to actually weigh in there. And when they finally did so, I think it was like a 4-3 split decision or whatever. Look, it is a victory for election integrity nonetheless, despite what I just said, that the court weighed in, that in an election this close, I think the final margin was McCormick beat Casey by 0.2 percentage, give or take there. It is a victory for election integrity that in a state that at least I was probably worried about more than any other state in the Republic about possible voter fraud shenanigans. I really was quite worried about Pennsylvania, honestly. I mean, it is a great testament to the fact that we are on relatively stable terrain, relatively, when it comes to electoral integrity, the fact that this election was not literally stolen out in the open. I mean, this was as clear and unapologetic as it gets. I mean, in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, at the local election commission, literally just saying, like, we know we can't count these ballots, we're going to do it anyway. I mean, Jill, if you had Republicans doing that, people would be in jail, heads would be rolling, there would be protests in the street, BLM would be vandalizing, looting, burning stuff down there. I mean, that was as brazen as it gets, what I've seen there. So look, I mean, credit where credit is due. I guess good for Bob Casey for no longer being an election denier, insurrectionist, whatever we're calling it, and finally throwing in the towel to Dave McCormick there. Dave McCormick himself, I don't really know what to expect, to be honest with you. At times he sounded kind of MAGA, at times he sounded kind of establishment. So I don't really know exactly what to expect from him. What I definitely know is that regardless of how he votes, he will be a heck of a lot better than Bob Casey. And in a 53-47 Senate, every senator matters. So I'm very happy with the result, obviously.
Yeah, amen to that. Let's talk about the FBI. We have this hilarious moment where former FBI Deputy Director Andy McCabe is on CNN, where he's a paid shill. He's on the cables, and he's saying Mike Rogers would be a logical pick for FBI director. Of course, that is not a very good endorsement if you're in our audience or any one of us. And on the other hand, you have Dan Scavino and others coming out and saying, no, Trump is not going to pick Mike Rogers. I wonder what you think about that. And also, people have been talking about Kash Patel for the last, I don't know how many days now, about why hasn't this happened yet? Do you have any insight into who the next FBI director might be?
Andy McCabe endorsing Mike Rogers is such a non-endorsement of Mike Rogers that you kind of have to wonder whether or not Kash Patel was texting Andy McCabe being like, "Hey, can you?" I'm being facetious, but honestly, like not like too facetious. I mean, that sort of stuff is definitely plausible in today's day and age, right? Look, Mike Rogers would obviously be a bad pick. I mean, this is someone who has intelligence community, deep state written all over him. I'm not saying that he wouldn't have been a better senator from the state of Michigan than Alyssa Slotkin. I'm sure he would have been, but I mean, he's essentially a company man. I mean, he is an FBI company man. So if you're trying to go up there and shake up the ranks, if you're actually trying to do that, which Donald Trump vowed to do on the campaign trail, and actually go in like a wrecking ball and drain the swamp, then you need people like Pete Hegseth at the Pentagon, a pick that I love. I'm a huge fan of Pete Hegseth as a pick there. I mean, you need people who are not company men, who do not work their way incrementally up the status quo of these Byzantine bureaucracies, wearing all the right badges, mouthing all the right platitudes there. Again, Pete Hegseth is that pick. Matt Gaetz would have been that pick at DOJ and so forth there. Mike Rogers, clearly not that pick. I think the fact that Kash Patel has not already been named, I think indicates that Donald Trump is probably being pulled in a lot of different competing directions. I mean, as we were just discussing, a minute or two ago, there is a big difference between picking someone like Matt Gaetz for Attorney General of the United States and picking someone like Pam Bondi. And that speaks probably to the fact that he has advisors that are genuinely pulling him in many directions. So I have no doubt that there are a lot of people at Mar-a-Lago, people probably like Donald Trump Jr., people like that who are pushing for Kash Patel there. And I have no doubt that there are also a lot of other people from the more establishment wing of the party who are pushing for someone like Mike Rogers. So look, the buck ultimately falls on Donald Trump. I guess what I will say is this, especially if someone like Gaetz is not going to be AG and if someone like Pam Bondi is going to be, that makes it all the more important that we get someone who is something of an outsider and not a careerist, bureaucratic-driven company man at the FBI. Because the FBI is ultimately, part of the DOJ bureaucracy, but it really is the origin of everything that went wrong in the first Trump term, the Russia collusion, delusion, Jim Comey, Christopher Wray, the Mueller probe, all of that has its origins in the FBI. So you really got to get this one pick right. And I hope that it is someone less like Mike Rogers and more like a Kash Patel.
Josh Hammer, he can cover it all. Thanks so much for your time. We appreciate it.
You bet. Thanks, guys.
And Peterson, we keep waiting for the FBI pick, right? Like, this is the thing that we keep wanting to know. Is it going to be Kash? Is it not? All I know, I don't want it to be somebody that CNN is out there trying to pick for us.
Well, unlike you, I'm not celebrating Christmas yet. So maybe I should be. But I am celebrating this. This isn't early Christmas. So look, I look forward to that pick. I don't think that Trump is going to screw it up. This is a really important pick, so I don't know. We'll see what happens. I do think it's interesting what Josh was saying about Bondi, right? I mean, she's loyal. She's going to be loyal to the president. Maybe her orders will be to go in and tear it up. But as he said, it's not quite the pick you'd expect to go in and reorganize the Department of Justice. Now, nothing against her. I mean, she's got a lot of great qualities and she may surprise us, but that was an interesting pick that I wouldn't say eyebrow raising, but it was sort of, I'm wondering about that one. Be honest, I did Dr. Oz. I'm a little bit meh, about that one. But pretty much the rest of them have been amazing. And even with Bondi, it's not clear what her mandate will be going in and who she brings with her. So it's interesting.
Either way, it's beginning to look a lot like Christmas. And Steve Deace is on my team. We had it on the Deace group earlier today. Maybe I'll be playing Christmas music in the break for you. I don't know. But when we come back, we'll showcase how liberal outlets are trying to rebrand themselves after the Trump victory. Don't go anywhere. Speaking of Christmas, you know what's worse than coal in your stocking? Well, having imported meat in your fridge. Santa wouldn't do that to the worst people on the naughty list, but the grocery store does it every day. This year, Good Ranchers is here to make sure that you receive the gift of meat that you can trust. Good Ranchers Holiday Special. You can subscribe to any of their 100% American meat boxes or wild-caught seafood and get a 10-pound spiral cut ham for free. Buy it for yourself. And then check out their new gifting page because everybody is going to want a high quality steak. This year, gift something that is a cut above the rest with GoodRanchers.com. They have burgers, ribeyes, surf and turf, and more. Good Ranchers has a gift box for everyone on your list. And it's delivered right to your door. There's no hassle, no stress. Satisfaction is guaranteed. So remember to visit GoodRanchers.com and use my code Jill to claim your free Spiral Cut holiday ham before it runs out. And you know what? If this holiday season is so good to you, then put the car keys down. Don't go to the grocery store. Go to goodranchers.com and use code Jill today for meat you can trust. Goodranchers.com. American meat delivered. After Donald Trump's big win, the Washington Post is shaking things up by removing its senior politics editor, Dan Egan, after 25 years at the paper. In an email about his departure, Egan said he'd leave it up to others to explain why. No word yet on whether he's staying on in a different role, but it's clear that some big changes are happening at the Post. Here to break it down for us is Blaze media critic Rob Eno. So Rob, let's dive into what's happening right now at the Washington Post. Is this all election related, or could there be other factors that we're not knowing
I
about?
think the election put the cap on it, but I think this stuff was happening before the election when you saw the Washington Post say that we're not going to endorse, when you saw the LA Times say that we're not going to endorse. And I think the thing is, they're hurting, right? We're all hurting. The news media is hurting. Facebook's not pushing people to get to websites, those sorts of things. But for places like the Washington Post and the LA Times, their traffic has cratered as well. And part of that is that people don't want to go to a place that doesn't share their values, or at least doesn't tell the truth.
Yeah. So, I mean, think about this in terms of ownership, right? I mean, the Washington Post, Bezos, one of my favorite Trump moments was back in the day when the Washington Post had a bunch of people assigned to attack him. And remember, he said famously, well, this is Bezos. He doesn't like me. And he just tied it right to the owner, which at the time was not something that anyone was talking about. Now everyone's talking about it because Bezos himself has been talking about it and saying that he wants to change the way they cover politics. And we also see this at the LA Times, right? The owner there, one of the wealthiest men in Los Angeles, he's saying we need to, we've conflated news and opinion. He sounds like a right-wing media critic, Rob. What do you think?
It's journalisming, right? Journalism degrees, people go to journalism school because they want to make a difference in people's lives. They don't go to reporting school, which is what the media used to be, right? When I don't know if the media's ever truly been, I think this whole neutral media thing is probably a figment of a lot of people's imaginations. But if you want to be objective, you report the facts. And when you do something like COVID, when you come out and say that ivermectin is horse pace, when it was a drug that was made by somebody that won a Nobel Prize for making the drug, and it's found all kinds of antiviral uses, you don't say experts say that ivermectin is horse pace and doesn't work without saying that there are other doctors that are equally qualified saying, well, we think it might work.
Yeah, and now he goes beyond just talking about conflating, opinion and news. He actually came right out and said we need more conservative voices in the paper. So even on the opinion side, some of these media outlets are saying that they actually need to be fair and balanced in some way and have conservative voices. I mean, that is, am I making too much of this? Or that does seem like a moment.
No, it is a moment.
You don't ever hear them say this usually.
It is a moment, and it's not conservative voices like Jen Rubin, who used to be a conservative, right? Or Brett Stevens. It's not coastal elite conservatives that want to go to the cocktail parties, right? It's real conservatives that come from middle America that can talk in a way that most of America talks.
Well, it's not just newspapers, though, right? Let's bring Rachel Maddow into it, because everybody knows that MSNBC is hurting right now as well. And she's reportedly being asked to take a $5 million pay cut. That would be a nice problem to have, by the way, after their ratings have been crashing since the election. So at what point do you look and say, is this an actual turning point in the mainstream media, or is this just a very brief moment post-election and they'll figure things out?
I think if advertising dollars dry up, if people aren't watching, I mean, MSNBC's ratings have cratered. The funny thing is a lot of our podcasts get more views than the nightly news on MSNBC or CNN, right? I mean, and that's what people, this new media thing where you sit down with somebody for 3 hours and talk to them and people listen. I remember trying to pitch something like this 3 years ago, before the merger, and people saying nobody's going to sit and listen to that kind of thing. But I think people want to get to know people. And that's the moment that we're in. As much as people, I mean, look at it. People are saying, oh, we need to have quick reels and things like that. But people listen to 3-hour podcasts with Donald Trump, and people listen to 7-hour history podcasts, right? People have the time, the attention span to listen to this stuff.
And the thing is, those a lot of this content too, it sticks around. It has weight, it has gravitas. It sticks around, and it's worth your time. But to MSNBC and Maddow, if we're going to talk about that, we have to talk about the fact that today, right, Elon Musk is responding to a kind of maybe not joke by Donald Jr. by the president's son, saying, "Why don't you buy MSNBC?" And he asked how much, just like he did with Twitter, right? And we have to admit the cost would be a lot less than Twitter was.
Absolutely, it'd be a lot less. So to see what Comcast is doing is they're spinning off MSNBC, CNBC. They're keeping Bravo, but they've got a bunch of Oxygen, Oprah's channel, into something called what they're calling SpinCo. It'll have a different name. If you own Comcast stock, you'll get this company, right? But everybody's saying that it's being set up so it can be acquired by somebody. Right. And you're seeing a lot more media companies go, the private equity route and things like that.
So is that someone Elon Musk?
Let's hope so. I mean, it's the exact same thing he said before he bought Twitter. How much?
So the $5 million they're going to save, right. From Maddow could go right to Jill Savage.
There you go. Sure.
When he picks up Blaze News tonight.
Exactly.
Starts airing Blaze.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, X is going to give it to you, I guess. It's going to be very, very interesting. I think that he's probably really thinking of it, because the Trumps have talked about trying to start their own network before, and I could see them actually doing that through Elon. I mean, Elon, I think, wants to make a difference, and that's one way that you can make a difference, being in millions of homes overnight.
My 90s rap brain just went to X. It's going to give it to you. There's a whole
I
90s
want
rap
Elon.
thing that's
I want
happening
Elon
right now.
to actually license that, so every time a tweet comes up with a
Yes.
notification, it starts playing that on your phone.
It should. Well, Rob, I hope that Elon goes out there and buys it, because we've seen how well this has gone with X and the freedom that has come back along with it. You don't have to worry about disinformation, misinformation, right? Like, this has been a good time.
It has been a fantastic time. And I love, and you're thinking that we're talking disinformation, misinformation, right? You talk about one of the things the Washington Post we talked about earlier needs to get rid of is their fact check section, because it's opinion checking. It's not fact checking. And I think what Community Notes has done on X has been insane. And if you could bring that to like a TV network with interactive real-time things, it could be game changing.
Right up the plan. Thanks so much for your time. Love it. Love having you here.
Thanks for having me on.
When we come back, Auron MacIntyre will break down why a bathroom policy is a make or break issue for House Republicans. Just ahead. As the world teeters on the brink of annihilation, Dietrich Bonhoeffer is swept into the epicenter of a deadly plot to assassinate Hitler in Angel Studios' upcoming film, Bonhoeffer, Pastor, Spy, Assassin. It comes out in theaters today, so get your showtimes right now at angel.com/Jill. With his faith and fate at stake, Bonhoeffer must choose between upholding his moral convictions or risking it all to save millions of Jews from genocide. Will a shift from preaching peace to plotting murder alter the course of history or cost him everything? Now, I can tell you, I have already seen the movie. It is incredible. I suggest that everybody go out there and watch it this weekend, because Angel Studios has done such a good job bringing this story to life. And you know what? I can't wait to go out there and watch this again. This movie is a must-see for the times in which we live. So find it right now. Get your tickets today at angel.com/Jill. House Republicans have been dealing with some heated gender debates lately. Representative Tim McBride from Delaware now identifies as Sarah, and Speaker Mike Johnson initially dodged questions about whether McBride is a man or a woman, but in a later press conference, he clarified, saying men are men and women are women. Meanwhile, Representative Nancy Mace has been facing threats over a bill requiring people to use bathrooms based on their biological sex. Now, tensions are definitely running high on this issue. So what do these incidents reveal about the GOP's stance on sex and gender? Here to break it down for us is BlazeTV host Auron MacIntyre. He wrote about this recently for theblaze.com. So Auron, Let's get into this. The GOP, transgender issues, where do they stand? How does this all break down?
Yeah, unfortunately, this should be a pretty easy thing to explain to the American public. Most people do not want strange men in the bathroom with women. It should have been very easy for Nancy Mace to go ahead and advance this idea that we should be keeping male members, no matter what they happen to wear that day, to Congress out of the bathrooms of female representatives. But unfortunately, while the bill that she put forward was a good idea, while it made sense, the way that her and Mike Johnson responded to all of this controversy was pretty embarrassing. The problem with Johnson, as you pointed out, was just his initial cowardice. Now, later, as you pointed out, he backtracked and said, oh, well, no, I do think men are men and women are women and they can't change. But it was very clear from his initial press conference that he was attempting to dodge these questions. He pushed a lot of rhetoric about how we should be respectful to every individual. And of course, that's true. That's how you should treat elected members of Congress, even if they're dressing strangely. But ultimately, he should have been prepared for questions like this. And the fact that the guy who is basically going to be at the head of pushing the MAGA agenda, the one that Trump should be issuing in after his mandate received from the American people, the fact that he is already very wishy-washy on stuff that we should have figured out a long time ago is unsettling, to say the least.
Oh, and it's interesting to me because on one side, when it comes to Nancy Mace, on the one side, there's probably no better person to push someone who is a little squishy like a Johnson, right? Because she is a woman, right? I mean, so she's a strong woman, a girl boss Republican, right? So her very image would help push someone like that who, is thinking about these things in a way that's like 20 years outdated, and we never should have thought of that way in the first place. But talk a little bit about Mace, who calls herself a feminist and is famous for some things in her past that some people, such as yourself, are pointing out now and making some interesting juxtapositions on. Tell us.
Yeah, like you said, Mace seems like the perfect person to advance this. And again, I applaud her desire to protect women in these spaces. I 100% agree with this. I'm not detracting from that at all. But the way that she approached this really shows that she has not thought through the issue. For instance, one of the tweets she put out on the issue said, like you said, she referenced herself as a feminist in this. She said, I was somebody who broke through the gender barrier by getting into Citadel and being the first female person to graduate from this all-male military college. Now I have to stop men from entering into these women-only spaces. Without seeing the irony she's talking about, she wants to be celebrated as a feminist who broke through a gender barrier. But then she's confused when the left wants to break through a gender barrier in a place like a bathroom. Now, obviously, a military college and a bathroom are not the same, but there's a reason that military colleges have been male only for the most of human history, and that's because militaries have been male only for most of human history. People can debate whether or not women should be in the military or especially on the front line, but if you talk to combat veterans on a regular basis, they'll tell you that unit cohesion and safety inside a military unit don't do so well necessarily when women have been introduced. And ultimately, if you're going to be pushing this idea that men and women are different fundamentally and therefore should have their own spaces, why can't men have their own spaces? Why is it so important for Nancy Mace to be celebrated as someone who invaded a male space but then demands spaces of her own?
Auron, this shouldn't be a hard issue, right? If you're in Congress, if you're not in Congress, we should still just be able to see common sense for what it is. But if you're in Congress and you're trying to get further ahead and get the people to like you and more exposure, well, I would like to say Riley Gaines is a thing out there, right? She has become a rising star in Republican circles because she was willing to stand up and say that men are men, women are women. You should not be competing against, women if you're actually a man. Is it just me? Is it very simple, right? If you're in the House, if you're in the Senate and you're trying to get your star to rise, like, I don't know, do what the person that has come on the scene, that this is her sole issue that has gone from unknown to very much sought after, right? It's not that difficult to figure out. This is where the trend is going.
Yeah, obviously, this is an issue that has one thing going for it. It is both morally correct and politically popular, which is the best kind of thing you can have in this scenario. It is correct to protect women and girls in their spaces, and it is also popular with the American people. They do not want this. But the problem for the Republican Party is so often it is embracing the left's frame. It is unable to go ahead and set its own terms and have its own values. So Nancy Mace thinks that the best strategy for her is to step into the left frame and say, I'm a feminist, I broke the glass ceiling, but then not connect this with the revolution that has now shown up at her own bathroom door. Later on, she also tweeted about her support for gay marriage and how it was so important to her. And you have to wonder, if you don't understand why the redefinition of marriage eventually leads you to the redefinition of gender, then what are you doing in the Republican Party? These are connected very tightly. And while the modern Republican Party would rather forget this fact, both Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton rejected gay marriage in 2008 because they knew it was unpopular at that time, and they needed to present themselves as people who supported family values. The fact that so many people in the Republican Party, including Nancy Mace, are now proud of being to the left of Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama is something they should really stop and think about when they're trying to push these kind of agendas.
Auron, and the last question, 60 seconds we got left with you. I want to push on the future, because when I look at this incident that just happened, I worry it's just the bubble that I'm in. I actually see a positive coming out of this, which is that people like you are pointing this point out very loudly and pushing the right, even though and I think if the House Republicans, this is a litmus test. If you can't vote to keep the bathrooms between men and women in the House, then you don't deserve to be a Republican, in my opinion. Now, you don't deserve the vote support. But is that the case? I mean, is this a sign? Do you see this as a winning, the response to this, moving in the right direction? Or do you see this just as a sign of this very severe problem within the Republican Party?
I think it is a litmus test. Like you said, it should be very simple. If people cannot give their assent to this, to protecting women, then obviously have no business being a Republican. And we've just seen the Republicans stab Donald Trump in the back when it comes to the pick of Matt Gaetz. So the fact that there are still people inside the Republican Party who are unwilling to get on board, unwilling to build that momentum, work for the agenda that the American people have requested, and protect women in the way that the conservative movement would like to demand, ultimately those people simply don't belong. And so I think a culling here, a weeding out of those that ultimately understand what the American people want, what conservatives want, and are going to be loyal to that, and those that are going to continue to serve the frame of the left are going to be buy into those entrenched interests in Washington and betray Donald Trump. I think it's very good that we can separate the sheep from the goats in this moment, and that's what this gives us an opportunity to do.
We'll take the wins when we can get them, but we know there's still a long ways to go. Auron MacIntyre, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
We'll deconstruct Jaguar's drive off a marketing cliff coming up next. As the dust settles after the presidential election, it might feel like this is a time to breathe, but this is no time to let our guard down. The forces that are trying to stop the truth, they haven't stopped. In fact, they're doubling down. So now more than ever, we need to stand firm. We need to push harder and ensure that the truth has a voice. Our independent platform, we're your ally in this fight. We're offering fearless political analysis and a healthy dose of camaraderie to keep us grounded, but we can't do it alone. So we need you to join us in this battle, because together we can push back against the lies and champion the principles that make America great. So if you haven't joined us already, now is the time. Become a Blaze TV member today and gain access to the arsenal of truth that we've built just for you. This is your home, your family, your front line in the ongoing fight for freedom and integrity. The next chapter starts right now. So go to blazetv.com/Jill and get $30 off. So if you love this show and you support what Blaze TV stands for, this is your chance to get even more involved with something special. It's blazetv.com/Jill for $30 off. British auto manufacturer Jaguar recently released a bizarre ad that features no cars. Take a look. Here to break this down for us is Isaac Simpson. He's the founder of Will Agency. So Isaac, please help us, because I have no idea what Jaguar is trying to sell us in that ad, and who thought this was a good idea?
Yeah, well, it was made by the UK brand team. And, the Jaguar is a failing brand. It's doing very poorly. It sold for $2 billion in 2008. And to put that in perspective, Tesla is worth something like $600 billion. And even a mid-sized car brand or a small car brand is about 50 billion. So they're really struggling, and they've been really struggling for a very long time. And so they've decided to switch everything over to EV, and they're going to be 100% electric vehicles. And then not only that, they're going to charge twice what they're already charging for their cars. So clearly they ask their marketing team to create a radical new approach to their branding, and they're getting rid of their iconic logo with their beautiful Jaguar logo, and this is what they came up with, the Copy Nothing campaign.
Now, Isaac, what's interesting about this is that there was an immediate response, right, online that I think was pronounced, and maybe we can say negative. Maybe I'm in a bubble, right? Maybe my feed is all the best
Your
people.
feedback loop.
But it does seem like it was pronounced and negative. What do you think, though, their goal was with this ad? I mean, you could make the argument, for instance, I think it's outdated, but you could make the argument like, look, we just showed their ad, right? And so the ad is spreading and it's controversial. But what do you think their strategy was?
Well, I don't think this was any publicity is good publicity situation. I think that they're in a bubble. And I think that the people that create the ads for this particular brand are just living in a bubble, as we've seen so many times, time and time again, with Bud Light and so many other brands. And they're living in a bubble. If you look at the brand director himself, who actually was in charge of this campaign, he's the kind of guy who goes on stage and he's wearing like a sheer see-through shirt. So, you could imagine the type of guy this is. And inside agencies where I've worked that make videos like this is called a brand video. It's not even a TV ad. They've just chased away all the people who would say, don't do this. They've chased away all the voices that would stop them from releasing such an ad. And they get in sort of a, bubble feedback loop where they're all pumping each other up and being like, oh yeah, this is radical, this is amazing. And then they come out with this and then they release it to the general public and they're shocked because they're like, wait, we thought this was radical and amazing and cool. But the fact is they're just completely disconnected with the people that they're selling the cars to.
Okay, so Jaguar has come out and said the criticism of this is vile hatred and intolerance. So take us behind the curtain, right? At an ad agency, when something like this does happen, what will they be doing now? What are the next steps at that point?
You mean to respond to the negative criticism?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they're probably telling themselves internally, well, we're the victim of hatred, right? And they're probably saying, this is exactly what happens when you try to be radical and new and inclusive, And so they're probably patting themselves on the back, and they probably are telling themselves, well, at least we made a splash. At least we made a lot of earned media, as it's called, which is when people talk about you. So they're probably, kind of coping by telling themselves this is exactly what they wanted, right? That's what I would imagine is happening now. The real measure, though, will be when they come out with their new line of EVs, which are, again, really expensive. They're making a radical bet on very, very expensive EVs. When none of them sell, then it'll be time to fire the marketing people. As what happened with Bud Light. The reason why Bud Light was such a disaster for AB InBev is because the revenue was undeniable. The drop in revenue, they were the number one brand in America, and then they dropped to not the number one brand in America and far down on the list. And so when the revenue starts to dry up, that's when they'll get fired or afraid.
So Isaac, what I think what it's striking a lot of people about this is everyone can remember when of a certain age when Jaguar was kind of cool, right? And it's like even in the cultural reason, even if you're younger, even if you're like 18, if you know anything about like the past, right? There's a James Bond kind of, cool, sexy, high-end thing going on. And what's interesting to me is that they seem to think that this will appeal, right, to that demographic. Of course, right after this election, it seems like things are changing culturally very rapidly. And so a lot of people said this ad now seems old and outdated. But it strikes me as people are talking about it because it represents what's happened to a lot of iconic brands, right? You went from James Bond, like cool, sexy, rich guy, right, who like does stuff, to whatever the hell this is. And you've ruined the brand in the process. And it says something about, a kind of decline. And it doesn't strike me as it doesn't have to go that way, right? So if it's a model for, what's happened to a lot of brands, is there any hope? I mean, do you think that there'll be a learning curve here? Or is it the case that there's a lot of 55-year-old, wealthy males who are going to end up buying these EVs because of this ad? I mean, I don't, talk about it as a symbol of what's going on. Help us out here.
Well, strategically, they're going to try to fill in where Tesla, because people are mad at Elon, they're going to try to fill in for, we can't drive a Tesla because we're liberals, we're well-to-do, we can't drive a Tesla, so what can we drive? Maybe we can drive a Jaguar EV, right? So they're going to try to hit that market. So in that sense, them doing this, at least strategically, has some, you could make some argument for it. That being said, again, you're totally right in what you're saying. The Jaguar is a car that sells to well-to-do men. My grandfather, a doctor, drove a Jaguar his whole life, and very proud of it. And they've lost that audience entirely, right? So in their minds, they're saying, well, we've lost our old audience. We need to go to a new audience, which is, EV fans. So we're going to drastically shift. Now, is that going to work? In my opinion, obviously not, because they're not going to be able to sell these really, really high-end EVs to this new audience that they're trying to make materialize out of the sky. I just don't think, I don't think it's going to work. But strategically, we'll just have to find out when the actual cars come out and if anybody buys them. I don't think they're going to, though.
They're turning the cars gay. They're queering the cars.
I don't see this EV for the Jaguar coming out to be the new midlife crisis car. Isaac Simpson, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you guys.
Matthew, when I was on the flight home with Glenn Beck from North Carolina, he loves talking about old cars, classic cars, collectors. And he was just obsessing over this one Jaguar that he was looking at and showing us photos. And he's like, why are they taking the engine out of a Jaguar, right? I have to imagine that he speaks for a lot of people.
Yes. I think what's happening also is you're seeing it almost be a high-end thing, right, to go back to retro, to have that old gas engine in there as well. So, I mean, just it strikes me, everything about this is sort of moving in the wrong direction, even just in terms of branding, for the brand. But also, I think I took away a hopeful, conclusion to all of this, which is that I think everyone saw this and was like, nah, this is just dumb. This doesn't make any sense. Why are you putting this weird stuff in there? And when you just think about it logically, what do sexualities have to do with a car? What is weird? The whole thing is, I think, outdated. And what you're seeing is a moment when people go, ew, that doesn't make any sense.
It's a pushback. We're making America great again. You and your British cars, we're going to come for you too. Don't go anywhere. When we come back, we'll wrap up the show. Stay with us. Well, it warms my little Christmas heart to see the Jaguar ad and to talk about it and to break it down, Matthew, because now we know that wokeness, right? We've been talking, is this it? Is this the end? Is this going to be the final pushback, right? The Bud Lightification of it all. Oh my gosh. Are we there? Have we done it?
I mean, it feels that way. It feels as if, first off, the people who work for this, who made this ad, right, are still employed everywhere across the country in most big corporations. And it's still these are still the people who control the institutions and the large corporate institutions as well, right? So that hasn't changed, right? No, there hasn't been a lot of people getting fired yet, because what has changed is the reaction to it. And I mean, the reaction to that was swift and, dare I say it, savage.
I approve of this message. I also approve that Rachel Maddow is looking at a $5 million pay cut that you were also trying to give me earlier in the show. I appreciate that from you. I appreciate more, though, about MSNBC potentially being up for sale in that conversation on X between Don Jr. and Elon, because he said, oh, how much is it going to be? This is how Elon started before he purchased X.
I mean, how serious do you think he is? I mean, when I see that, I think he's got to wonder, because it's going to be way less, as I said earlier, than X, right? And he is looking to move into video. Yeah. And you could easily see wanting to sort of have a dragging, tail into cable to bridge the gap and bring people into the new thing, and you'd focus the resources. Now, the question is, would it be better just to start something new, or is MSNBC really worth anything, at this point for his purposes? But it's certainly possible.
I just look at this and say, how many companies is Elon going to own, right? It's always like, oh, NFL owners, you can only own one NFL team, and your NBA team has to be in another city. And I feel like that's what Elon, we're going to have different Elon rules now.
So I will say the one thing about Elon is he keeps it all out front and center, so you see it.
You do.
For a lot of these people, you don't necessarily know, right? Until Trump mentions that Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post, right? You don't think about it that way. Oh, they must keep these things separate. So at least Elon just brings it out. And, when he's saying the most interesting or amusing, ironic thing is the most likely outcome, and he's talking about buying MSNBC, it's certainly possible. And look, even outside of what's going on with Elon right now, the entire frontier is open in media, because everyone is thinking about how they need to recalibrate and change. And that goes from legacy, corporations, which are full of spineless suits and woke lunatics, but they know they have to bow towards us now, right? Or you get people who are more interesting, who are going to be thinking about buying all kinds of new companies and merging them together and acquiring stuff and changing their strategy, because they can see this stuff just doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, and it's not just political. Even though if it is on the right, it doesn't have to be just based in politics. Some people will say it's a cultural movement in addition to a political movement at the same time.
Yeah, almost a commercial cultural movement, a new frontier. There's a great magazine, by the way, I saw the other day. It was around the office. It's called Frontier. It's amazing.
It is amazing. It's going to be an amazing weekend. I am going to do my best to get Matthew Peterson to stop being a Grinch and to give in to Christmas music before Thanksgiving. Yes. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I will try my best, Matthew.
After Thanksgiving, okay, liturgical season's not started. Anyway, I respect, Steve Deace and your enthusiasm as well. For this, but no, Christmas is not happening yet.
There's so much love to go around for the Christmas season, and we will be breaking it all down, though, whatever happens between now and Monday.